Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Here's yet another podcast, and we're going to be having podcasts here as a standard way of operating in the near future that will be distributed everywhere through these different podcast systems. But for time being, this is the easiest way to get things out. I try and keep these things simple so information get out, and of course, it goes to the people that should get it. And that's the way it goes. But let's talk about, and of course, remember to support us on Patreon, all access, etc. All sorts of great things are put on Patreon, and you're constantly getting lots of free information, free videos, etc. there for all of our Patreon supporters. And of course, they are all from our private library and are to be used only by Patreon members. Okay, now moving into it. Are you a meat puppet? So I've got these puppets here, and most people are puppets. Really, they just puppet whatever they've been told. And of course, this is done on the level of what you have been instructed with and are dealing with. So, but everybody's a puppet. Yes, they are. And the bottom line is you can have a PhD for doctorates, and you puppet what they told you. Very few people think and go past that. After all, you want to be part of the system and make money from your puppeting adventures. You can be a person who is uneducated, knows nothing, but follows some sort of goofball out there in a general understanding. This is typical of self-educated people, get into some sort of industry, have their own personal viewpoints. Usually you're going to come from a society or for a parental system of other stupid people. And of course, you're going to mimic or puppet them. Now, a meat puppet is someone who only believes in the lies of society, because really they are lies, that you're just a meat puppet. There's nothing outside of flesh and blood. There's nothing happening there. There's no movement that is anyway not connected to physical energy, even though when you really break down all of it, it comes down to so many different things, and they're not really physical. There's a lot of energy fields that are in you, just like in your brain, that makes your brain work and it fires that electric signal. You know, you're a semi battery, you're a chemical battery, and this is what keeps you going. And of course, that's what science likes to say, but I mean, most of this is not properly known about it, analyzed, or can be figured out what it is. You got to remember that we don't have, from the meat puppet society we live in, which is people who are either who want some sort of understanding based on primitive old knowledge that is completely interpreted wrong. And then you have the other sector of people. And there's three sectors that are mythical monkeys, people who live in a fantasy world. That believe in comic book gods and people that are raising from the dead and immaculate conceptions and all the things that go with that, and that these had mystical powers, all these books that are written thousands of years ago that have been translated thousands of times based on stories that weren't written down for hundreds of years. These are all the things that go on. And of course, people don't quite understand that. People are under the impression that so-called, quote, holy books were written right at that time by the person getting the information, and that was it. Most people were illiterate and have been for many years. I mean, literacy is something that's fairly new, by the way. There were many illiterate people in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s because they grew up in the backwoods and the farmlands, and they didn't go really to school proper. So this is nothing new. I think literacy at this day and age is a little higher, but then we have other things like dyslexia, where people are not functioning well. And I wonder how many people can read and write generally. I mean, we all kind of do, and it really depends on where you're at. So I think it's bigger than we think. But that's even more, it's not the literacy of reading writings from somebody who got it wrong to begin with. And of course, that's what you do when you're highly educated. You write a book with a bibliography in it. Well, I got all my information from here. So I got the information from here, and then I decided to rewrite it, which, everybody screams about plagiarism, but isn't that what all books are about? It's plagiarism. If you're going to write a book, and I did this with a couple of my books, and then I stopped doing it because I didn't get my information from there. I used that as a base level of understanding, and then took my higher consciousness to interpret it the best possible way for it to be used based in the information available to us today. And this is the problem with mimics and other people, particularly in the radionic scalar industry, is they want to go back and build something like was already built 100 years ago. Well, that's a pretty stupid way of doing things. Certainly, all those people that tend to be prized, no matter whom they are, Tesla, De La Warr, Ruth Drown, well, certainly they wouldn't be going back and say, can I find a part from the 50s that I can use now? So you would use the updated technology you have today. I mean, this is what a person who had more of a background did, who was more of an engineer and someone who worked in electronics to some degree, from what I understand, which is Galen Hieronymus. He kept changing his machines as new technology came in. He started off using what was available then, like everybody did, including Wilhelm Reich, who used what was available then. He didn't make stuff from out of the sky. He didn't channel in future types of electronics. He used what he had. So that's what all these people did again. And if Tesla was to come back today, he certainly wouldn't be going back to the old electronics that he had in the 50s, 60s, 40s, etc. He would be using the new integrated circuits. He would be using certain processors, and he would be using whatever is available. It's good. Now, what we use today, particularly for the type of energy we're dealing with, is we're using vacuum tubes, which are now modern made and of higher quality. But it's good tech. You use it. And of course, if it's good tech, you keep using it. But it doesn't mean you base everything in old tech, because most old tech for common purposes is outdated. You want to use the new tech that uses less electricity, that works better, lasts longer. But you got to remember that, the whole area of psychotronics is a unique one. And there's going to be old tech or old philosophical electronics, as I like to call them, occult engineering, that are going to be good today, that you can combine with the new things. But in general, older stuff is not worth much in its concept of it. You get old machines, no matter almost what they are, particularly in this field, and they're big, giant boxes in cases that we don't do anymore. We don't have that kind of room. It's impractical. They weigh a lot. So what's the point? So, yeah, let's copy that. It doesn't make any sense. So when you write a bibliography, you're telling people, I got the information from there. And ultimately, everybody bitches about it, but it's plagiarism. So the whole idea is you got to get information, compile it with your own consciousness, what you know today. Hopefully you're at a higher level. If you're a writer and so forth, you're going to do things with that particular understanding involved. So you're looking for information, and then you're going the golden mean. So there's the old superstitious way, which really gets you nothing. That's really falls into the category of religion. And then you have the scientific way, the stooge way of that, which is you're stuck in horrible dogma. Then, of course, there's the other path, the golden mean. So you put all those together and you make sense. I mean, spiritual people really that are very spiritual, that think every leaf that falls off a tree is a message from God, or sitting there holding a crystal thinking that this is going to change your life, bore the hell out of me. I really dislike these people. They're really equivalent. And of course, that falls into the religious metaphysical nonsense area. And metaphysics is not nonsense when it's combined with other things. We have to use general terms. But the crystal holding, the religious people, regardless of what religion they are, they're all goofy. It's easy to criticize some religions over others. But let's face it, they all say the same garbage and produce nothing. And we've had 4,000 years of religion, and we're such a perfect society. So you get into that mysticism, you have a real problem. When you deal with mystical societies, you have to be very careful. Now, two mystical societies are Mexico and India. Now, India has all this high-tech stuff, but they're very mystical and, they use numerology and astrology at very high levels, even if they're very affluent, educated people. And, you can't even get married there unless your astrological stuff connect. Now, these again are guideposts. Is that something you should be aware of? Maybe you should know your chart and your mate's chart, and maybe you should figure out things numerologically. That is a pointing stick. It's not a fact. So this is what goes on as well. And then you go into science, which wants to tell you everything's a meat puppet again. So you get into the namby-pamby stuff, which is all this illusional stuff and it's really all based in stories. This Raji Maji Gaji did this and that. You find out they really haven't done anything, and they really, like most people, like Sai Baba, who's pretty much been proven to be a child molester, a pedophile, and so many other of these things. And of course, India has achieved absolutely nothing. It's still basically a total dunghole, and they haven't achieved anything. They have 1.5 billion people, and they circle through from that pool of people. They're able to educate. There's a huge competition engine just because there's so many people. So if you have so many people, you're going to get people that can be brainwashed in schools and produce what they're good at, which is computer programming, which is the lowest form of operating that you can. It's strictly complete dogma. You have to, dots and dashes. You have to put this together. It's not something that uses creativity whatsoever. It's about following very strict rules. And of course, that's what the schools teach you, and they're able to then get these people because there's such a vast area to draw from. So that's why they tend to have that. And a lot of software that's being used around the world comes from India. So we have to keep that in mind. So, but this is their own dogma. So these people, even though they're, quote, technological, are caught up in a lot of nonsense and don't know how to do good research. They're not making anything of value in terms of outside of things. They're basically, their business people are pretty poor. When you buy things from China, you usually get excellent service and excellent products. You get something from India, it's usually very crude, tends to be over expensive, and that's all part of the reality that they're doing. And generally, it's not the best of value, and you can't really depend on it. Yet the Chinese, you certainly can, and you always get a good quality, you always get a fair price in general. But when you get into this mysticism stuff, you mess up your whole reality. And what you're doing is you are manipulating your reality to come out in the way you want. That's the problem with people who are involved in too much divination, which I used to do all the time, and moved away from it because it seemed to be that I was making my divination come out the way I wanted it to come out, because that was supposed to be, instead of using the divination as guideposts. And this is the problem with divination. If you do a reading for something and you're drawing some runes or tarot cards about something in the future, what you're telling yourself is that this is what's going to happen, and you're going to make that happen in that way, even if it's negative. So you have to be careful there. You have to, again, like everything in life, you have to do it at a high neutral level. So then we get into, as I said, and that's still a meat puppet way of operating, because it's just a meat puppet belief in mythology and silliness. And then, of course, you have the mythology and silliness of science. Now, science is just a bunch of garbage put together in a very structured institutional form with a bunch of closed-minded idiots that really think they know something. Yet none of it really has been proven. I mean, basically, we are working on technologies that go back 500 years. All the basic information we have, which are our foundations, go back 500 years. And then we mix stuff in there, and then we try and make heroes out of people like Einstein. Didn't come up with anything new. His theory of relativity was based on way previous, 100 years before he wrote his paper on this. People were writing papers on that. So what he did is give you his interpretation, which he did in a few pages from what I understand, if I have the story completely correct, and then was lauded for that. And he was lauded for that because where he came from and the kind of social pressure that they wanted people from this area, this place in the Europe, this middle place in Europe that's trying to control the world through their German Arabic thinking, and everything is created by that. So they pushed him ahead for that, and everyone else that they can, they push ahead. And of course, everything is now named in the German Arab names for things that had nothing to do with it, like Hertzian, when it was Maxwell that figured all this out, a Scottish boy. So these are the things you have to understand, and this is the kind of dogma you get into, and then the dogma extends into all these manipulative processes that you have. People like Sean Carroll, the new breed of philosophical, theoretical physicist. And of course, that's what they are. And of course, that's what Einstein was, a theoretical physicist. Maybe ifs and buts. Yeah, the theory, but no, we don't really know what the truth is. It's all based on theories. And these theories, they claim are proved when they're really not. And what we have is nothing has changed in 500 years when we go back to the originators of them. We can go back even further because most of these things that we talk about go back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, who really invented everything from a huge influence from Egypt, who they occupied for 800 years. So this mixed together in what we have now is called Western science. So, and you got to remember, the Romans were able to get one of those giant Egyptian obelisks and moved it from Egypt in ancient times to Rome, where it is sitting today in the Vatican. Well, how did they do that? Well, we don't know. We just build crap and poison. We got big giant buildings. They don't fall down. But, I'm not sure that's very common engineering. And again, we have engineering, which is again kind of the middle ground to a degree of these paths as well. There's always the golden mean. And the reason why engineering is a middle ground is because it has to work, or at least kind of, and most of the time. If you build a bridge and it falls down in 10 years and kills a bunch of people, or a building falls down in 10 years, that of course wasn't blown up like in 9/11 with a bunch of thermite and laser beams and all sorts of fun things, there's going to be a problem. Of course, that was blown up, so you can't blame the engineers that it fell down. So the whole idea is that's the only thing that has some proof to it. But engineers are still basing on their theories that they think is the way to do things. And that changes to a degree because if you can find something better, generally engineers are going to use it because it's better for them. They build stuff better. They get all the kudos. They get the money that comes from all that. So we have all those realities there. That's very interesting. So those are kind of the middle ground. But you got to remember that when you get into all of these thought forms and you're not operating from the middle ground, well, yeah, there's a lot of things in life we don't understand. That's in your mystical side, your more religion-y side, but you're not really believing anything. So you have to be very careful that you don't fall into the, in the end, it's all from Jesus, and that all the religious stuff means something. But it doesn't mean anything. All religions have failed. We've had 4,000 years, starting from Judaism. We have 2,000 years of Christianity. And, the world is just perfect, isn't it? So we have no problems. We've taken care of everything. Everybody's happy. And these little cartoon God forms have been helping the people here to get better. And, of course, the world is peaceful, wonderful, and we're not hurting each other, at least to a good degree. Well, that's not true at all. So if you think this world shouldn't be perfect, and probably shouldn't because you have to have some free will and develop yourself, but there's a happy medium. And the happy medium is that we have nothing but evil scum running everything with no checks and balances. And if you look at all these companies, and if you consider particularly big companies of the West and particularly America, well, most of the people working for these corporations that are cheating people, destroying the earth, and basically doing as negative as they possibly can, well, they're all going to church on Sunday. I'm sure they'd all say they were Christians. All the bankers, the cops, the doctors, they can pretty much guarantee that. And probably most of the scientists who claim they don't believe in this, but a lot do. Some of them are even physicists, which I did a little video on. That's a born-again Christian. And it believes all science is based on Jesus, and they have him as a top researcher. And let's not forget Crippled Boy, who's in a wheelchair, who's giving us great thoughts about black holes and everything else. So those are the kind of people that represent science. So the whole idea is that we had to go. Science is nothing more than a really polluted thinking coming from great mysticism and the lack of understanding. That's what science is. It's dumbademia at its highest level of arrogance. And none of these people, they're so arrogant, they think they know everything. Kind of similar to someone, if you meet them, if they're, who scream Jesus every 5 seconds while they're stabbing you in the back and stealing your money. It's pretty much the same thing. You have these particular dogmas you live in. And as such, those dogmas must be fulfilled in the desired way that you believe in them. And if you don't follow with the dogma of that particular system, Caltech, MIT, and pretty much any of these training institutes, well, you're going to be kicked out. They're going to get rid of you. They're not there to have alternative opinions. They're there. You have to learn their way. And I'm assuming there's a certain area where you can expand into and have your own opinions in that area, which will be tolerated, but most of it will not be. And we know how hollow science is because what we have right now is the fact that every single major scientific institution has been caught lying, contriving, and putting information together that is false because there's nothing new to learn from their perspective. So they make up stuff so they can get grants and bring money to that school, and that's how the school system works, and you have to understand that as well. People don't even understand, again, if something is based in money, and that's what they all are, and your research is going to be paid for by a corporation, and you better come up with things that corporation wants you to come up with. And to a degree, again, here we go with the golden mean. I certainly understand that. I mean, if you're trying to find a particular type of new adhesive and somebody comes up and said, well, these chemicals are really interesting. They can be used for other things. We think they may even be good as a supplement or a healing thing. Well, I don't make supplements and healing stuff. I mean, you have to find stuff for an adhesive. Why am I going to pay millions of dollars for that? Now, a smart businessman would say, well, is this really a breakthrough? Maybe we can sell this to somebody and let them research it while we go back to making a good glue. So there are, and again, but nobody is balanced. So what all these physicists and scientists do is make up a bunch of stuff so they sound important. And after all, they're big egomaniacs. That's why you go into teaching and everything else, so you can play little dictator, tell your students what to do, and molest them, and do all the things that our wonderful teachers do. It's amazing how many teachers, and we're not talking necessarily on the college level, but I'm sure that goes on there as well. How many teachers in junior high and high school are humping their students? Quite amazing. It's very, very common, particularly with female teachers, who you would think have a capacity to go out and meet people easier. They certainly do. That's the one nice thing about being a woman if you're seeking sexual. But grab what's next to you. So the whole idea is this is what happens with Dumbademia, and Dumbademia itself is a rotting, horrible, corrupt place, kind of like the rest of society. You think there's something special there? Well, I've had a lot of experience, even from regular public schools into higher education, and they're all pretty sucky, and the people involved in it are rotten people. It's just as simple as that, because they're all part of society. There's certainly nothing better about learning institutions. But of course, people are all there. They want to be there. They want to learn, blah, blah, blah. So you have a certain cohesive group of people. But what are you learning and from whom? So this is the problem. So you get people like Sean Carroll, who's one of those populist physicists out there, theoretical physicists. Man, we don't know. And he wants to be a philosopher now. And he's teaching the philosophy, I believe. I'm not sure the exact name of the course. Somewhere back east in, Baltimore, whatever university is there, the Baltimore whatever the name is. And, of course, he wants to tell everybody philosophy based in something he's never really studied. So he's taking his knowledge from Dumbademia, from the dogma he's learned, and now he wants to apply his dogma to philosophy. And, of course, you can always find out with the kind of low-level bottom feeder he is as well. So, because with his numerous connections, particularly on YouTube, and all the people he has in his Patreon account, that he makes a lot of money from. And of course, he stated that if I didn't make a lot of money from this, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't bother with it. I'm not here to educate you. I'm here to make money. I mean, he's stated this. He would never do any of this stuff or take the hours he does to answer questions and other things unless he was making money from it. So he's not really here to educate people. And probably a lot of money, and he does make a lot of money from all of these Patreon other things. With thousands of people paying him a few dollars, it adds up to a lot of money. And of course, these people never have enough money. So we have all that. So, I mean, again, that's a pretty bad attitude. I can certainly see not doing things for free, but some things you have to do as a service to get the proper information out there, and hopefully you get some money back from it, and that could be minimal. I mean, it's like being a TV evangelist or a minister. You need to be paid, and we all understand that. But if you're making a lot of money, millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have to wonder, well, is that part of religion? And secondly, is that part of education? That you have to do everything and make money from. And he is, again, I'm just stating what he has stated, as well as what I will say as a minute. So he tries to come off, and this is the cop-out you'll hear from, and he's pretty much, he doesn't want to get into any arguments. He just wants to state his dictatorial opinion, and he doesn't want to discuss anything. And I'm not sure even arguments are, you're supposed to discuss things and get information. But he doesn't have anything to learn. He knows everything. He has no intention of discussing anything with anybody. And he's stated this again. And he certainly doesn't want, as he stated, he would never get into arguments. What's the point? Well, I think arguments is a bad term. What you're talking about is discussing and you're trying. But he's not going to be open to anything. So it's a waste of time, and he knows it. So he wants to sit there and scream his opinion. He doesn't really care what anybody else's is. And he plays the game that, oh, wouldn't it be nice? Wasn't that a Beach Boys song? Wouldn't it be nice? So the whole idea, if there was aliens, regardless of the unbelievable amount of data now that we have because of the internet and the people talking out there of alien information, of course, we never can consider, well, the government would never hide anything from you. They would never, all that information everybody would have. And the reason we don't have it because it doesn't exist, right? That's the kind of dog shit thinking that a physicist with a PhD has. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if there was an Atlantis? And he talked about this in some question. He said, but there's no Atlantis. Well, we have an awful lot of underwater archaeology going on. Or didn't you look at that, Shawnee boy? So the whole idea is there seems to be irrefutable proof of that. Again, it's probably he probably thinks the same thing. There's nothing under the pyramids or the Sphinx or anything else when there are huge tunnels there that now have slowly, like everybody has stated, from Edgar Casey the psychic to physical archaeologists now, that have found all these tunnels. And even Havas from Egypt wandered into these things to a degree, and then they stopped doing it for whatever strange reason that is. But I'm sure he doesn't, well, none of it's there. I haven't heard about it, so it doesn't exist. But wouldn't it be nice if it had tunnels and super societies? We could all make a comic book movie out of it. This is the kind of nonsense you get from these people, and why it is so, why they have absolutely no reason to believe anything is said. And we got to remember, everything in life is based on one thing and one thing only. When it comes to alternative people, it's all about proof. Where is it? They want to know what's going on. Where is the proof of it? Let's see it demonstrated. And when you, as a psychic or an energy practitioner who's doing martial arts, and you can't do everything 100% of the time perfect, you are a fraud. Well, we need to take that same kind of attitude that you're a fraud to all those theoretical physicists that can't really prove anything. To all those engineers that build garbage that doesn't work and breaks. So where's the proof? Well, the point is that these people fail all the time, and they still maintain their credibility. That needs to stop. You criminal scientists who put together poisons and destructive garbage and say nothing about it, and overlook free energy technologies, and overlook healing technologies should be put on trial for treason. This is crimes against humanity, and you ought to be held accountable for it. And if you're a goofball religion person making ridiculous statements that hurts the society, getting people to live in a fantasy world, you ought to be put on trial for treason as well. What we need in this society right now is we need trials, and we need people to brought up for treason against humanity. Not to mention your own country, which seems to be something Americans specialize in, is being traitors and going with the enemy. Huh, Scott Ritter? So the whole idea is that these are all the things out there that we have to look at. That's what we need now. We need proof and validation on every single level. And we have to get those liars and deceivers, those people who have committed criminal acts of lying to people, stealing money, and leading everybody down a deadly dead end to destruction and annihilation. These people need to be held accountable. Enough is enough. That's what has to be done. So if you're a meat puppet and you believe in all this stuff and there's nothing mystical or everything's a metaphysical goofball of some little being up in the sky, you are a meat puppet moron. You're dangerous to yourself and you're dangerous to society, and you ought to be brought up on treason charges, crimes against humanity. That goes for all these things, for these evangelists that are worth literally hundreds of millions of dollars and have done nothing to help anyone. Treason, crimes against humanity, and you too, you little theoretical fifth. Until next time.